Okay.
Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies of workplace dynamics. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Humanist. Thanks for joining us. If you're catching us on the audio platforms, make sure when we wrap up, you drop down and give us a rating. And if there's anything really interesting or cute or amazing that comes out of my mouth or Patsy's mouth today, please make a note. And I always read the suggestions and read any notes. Big welcome, Patsy Doerr. Welcome to the Humanist. Thanks for taking some of your time out during your day.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to kind of finding out a little bit more about your story.
Mm-hmm.
The Humanist, really, I started this podcast as an offshoot to the Jar podcast, traveling around the country with a big jar of questions, interviewing people, in their homes, about life and about human stuff. And it's been really an amazing journey. And I got a message from a new contact yesterday, and said he had gone back and listened to one of the episodes. And it was one of those that I'd kind of buried in my own mind, because just the heaviness of the conversation and the person's story was really rough. And they were on that new road. They were on the hopeful path. And we just had a little chat this morning. I just checked in with her because I hadn't talked to her in probably about a year. And it's funny. She said, I still haven't listened to the episode. It was a lot, and I still haven't listened to it. So it was she really got a lot off her mind and a lot off her, the metaphorically off her chest during the conversation. So I have a feeling she'll be listening to it this week and kind of taking all of it in, her journey.
Right.
Yeah, it's fun. We meet people and have these conversations and don't always recognize the significance of it for people. Patsy, you've had a lot of conversations over the careers. I'm looking at your profile and really interesting path. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up where you're at today.
Sure. So I've had a very interesting path with a multifaceted path. Every role that I've ever taken has been a brand new role, a build out, or a time of transformational change. The opportunity to work in a variety of different industries. So I started off at undergrad college as a math and science pre-med major who came out. Yes.
Okay.
I have in biology and I took the MCATs. But I came out of college and realized with a sister who's 10 years older, who is a doctor, that I was not nearly mature enough to commit to 10 years, frankly, of anything. And certainly medical school and the like would require that. So I decided what I'm going to do with this sort of math and science brain, but also having very much of an extroverted human part to my personality. So I looked at the JP Morgan, a variety of investment banking training programs, and I ended up JP Morgan training program. And that's where I started my career.
Wow. That sounds like boot camp for corporate life.
Pretty much. It actually was boot camp for corporate life. In fact, I tell my children that. I don't know if they're going to listen to me, but they're both in college now. And I said, it's the best training you'll ever get just for any type of business perspective. Yeah. So I did that. And a couple of years into that journey, I realized that I enjoyed talent development. And I ended up running the program that I went through at JP Morgan and getting my master's at night at Fordham University here in New York in human capital, adult learning.
I love it.
So it really helped me sort of define what I wanted to do with my career at that stage of my life. So that led to my spending about 65%, if not 70% of my career in financial services or related to financial services, and particularly in investment banking. So I went from JP Morgan in New York to Deutsche Bank in London to Credit Suisse in New York and ultimately in Hong Kong for the last 6 years there in my first time at Credit Suisse. So I've had the opportunity to also live in a variety of different countries, which has been fantastic. And so my kids spent 6 years of their life in Asia. So I think that's really defined a lot of who they are.
At HKIS?
They went to HKIS. They sure did.
Yeah, I had one daughter graduate there and one spend 4.5, almost 6 years there. Yeah, interesting. A little. We'll have a side chat after about living in Hong Kong. Very
Okay.
interesting. Very cute. Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that does give you a lot of different views on human capital as well, because these are different culturally very diverse places. New York, I would,
Yeah.
an observer would say less, uh, more about get it done and less about how we get it done. I would be curious the European angle, and then in Asia. So you've got some really different cultural places you worked. How are they different or the same?
Well, it's very interesting, and I'll answer your question for sure, but I'll add an additional comment in the sense that when I was in Asia, I was responsible for the whole region, as you know from being there, quite a complicated region, 14 countries that Credit Suisse operated in,
Yeah.
from underdeveloped to developed markets.
Yep.
And I'll tell you that because that's really where my interest and expertise in diversity, equity, and inclusion began. And so it was at that
Okay.
role that I became the chief diversity officer at Thomson Reuters, and then ultimately the chief diversity officer for Credit Suisse globally for my second tour there 10 years later. Um, but so it's been quite interesting. And yes, having worked for US based organizations, European based organizations, and in Asia as well, the cultural differences are very stark and in a positive way. I think it's
Yeah.
so important, right? And I also think that cultural competence is frankly a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion that's underplayed and often
Mhm.
valued. And so I always like to bring it to the forefront of how important that is, particularly in today's global environment.
Yeah.
And to your point, in New York, just get it done. In the U.S., having more of that approach. Working for a Swiss bank with my leadership always based in Switzerland. So although I didn't live in Zurich, I spent a significant amount of time in Switzerland as well as living in
Okay.
London.
Right.
And really, the way the Swiss operate is also very, very different. Very process oriented, very thoughtful, slower generally. Although the organization, at being an investment bank, had to operate rather quickly, but
Yeah.
the Swiss versus the U.S. versus the APAC dynamic was fascinating because then going out to Asia, for example, as you well know, the pace, and particularly at the time that I was there, Asia
Yes.
growth mode. So we were really operating fast, rolling up our sleeves, getting things done. I ended up wearing multiple hats when I was in Credit Suisse,
Mm.
which is really what led to the rest of my journey, the last 15 years of my career, having taken so many different turns because I had the opportunity to play so many different roles, particularly in that growing region.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think one of the fun dynamics, depending upon the years you were in Asia, they were catching up and the markets opened up, and it was all of this foreign talent coming in to pass on the knowledge and really lift up the countries that were just starting out, and people who had just, really didn't have any role models or company role models or cultural corporate, different, or they had role models, but different. And so this was kind of affecting corporate culture, but it was so fast paced and people were so hungry to grow. And, you could see somebody start off as an intern and become a vice president in 3 or 4 years in these markets. So it's just fascinating time.
Absolutely, 100%. I was there 2006 to the end of 2011, so about five and a
Great
half.
time. Yeah, great time.
Yeah. So while the financial crisis was taking place in 2008, we were still in growth mode in Asia,
Yeah.
right? So I was kind of shielded from a lot of that many of my former colleagues had to experience.
Yeah, it was still going really quite strong.
Yes.
So you're back in New York. So what have you been doing so after you left Asia, you came back to New York?
I did indeed, and not
Okay.
necessarily by choice in the end, but not planned, I should say. We
Yeah,
weren't
yeah.
wasn't looking to leave Credit Suisse, nor was I looking to leave Asia, but I was recruited by Thomson Reuters to come back to the United States and specifically be based in New York to be their first global head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And
Okay,
so
okay. Yeah, you can't say no to that.
he cannot say no to that. So we came back, and that role was fantastic. I was there for about 7.5 years, and my role continued to grow while I was there. So I took on corporate social responsibility a couple years in, and then I ultimately took on ESG and sustainability
Right,
for the firm.
sure.
So
Yeah.
by the time I left Credit Suisse in 2018, I was running, sorry, Thomson Reuters, I should say,
Yeah.
I was running all of social impact. And then that led to the next chapter of my career. So
Which fast forward a little bit.
Fast forward a bit, I will indeed. So after that, I then ended up going back to Credit Suisse. My old boss hired me back to be the global head of diversity and inclusion for the firm.
Just to start that all right. To fix it or just turn it around or start it up. Yeah.
Pretty much turn it around. Yes.
Okay.
And it was a difficult time for the firm as well. And as you know, as you may know, unfortunately now Credit Suisse has been purchased by UBS and I saw a lot of the cracks in the ceiling when I was there, as much as I enjoyed the role and the people and the experience. But I ended up leaving there to take on a different role, which was to be the CEO of a nonprofit, the Association of Junior Leagues International, which is a women's leadership and community engagement.
Okay.
So I took the role because I had been a member myself in New York and London many, many years ago. And B, they were looking for someone to come in and redo the mission, the strategic plan, and the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. So it was a great opportunity to really leverage my existing skill in a completely different environment, the nonprofit arena, a membership-based organization, and my first time as a CEO. So great.
Lovely.
Yes. Really enjoyed it. And we'll get to today here in just a moment, I was recruited out of the junior league about 2.5 years in. We had completed the strategic plan and the mission, et cetera, by a real estate investment trust to be their first, the common theme of my career, chief people and ESG officer in one role, as well as the first woman on their executive team. So that was very exciting, Ken. However,
holy cow.
Yes, they were based in Denver, Colorado. And so I was commuting between Denver and New York, which didn't seem like a big deal to me, having commuted to Zurich for many years and having lived all over the world. But it became too much time. The every other week that we originally negotiated became more and more. And it was my daughter's last year in high school. And then they wanted me to move to Denver. And I said very frankly to the CEO and very to whom I said, listen, I love the job, great organization, but Denver is not my place. I'll live in any large city. I grew up in Manhattan. I don't have a driver's license. I'm not moving to Denver.
It's funny you found your heart, like after all that stuff you've done, all the roles you've taken, all the crazy stuff you said yes to. Like that was my first. Yeah, that one's out.
That's out. Exactly. When he coined the expression, which I now use, which he said, well, I get it. You're an urban dweller. I said, that is spot on. Exactly what it is. I'm an urban dweller. So.
Oh, so funny.
Yeah. So it was a great. And I had never worked in a real estate investment trust, but of course there was a direct link to financial services. So it wasn't so different from my previous experience. And then I decided to leave for that reason. And also it's my daughter's last year of high school. I'm a brand new empty nester. And so I ended up starting my own consulting firm, which is Change for Social Good. And that is what I've been doing for the past year. So what I do is I do workshops on leadership development topics, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, on ESG sustainability. I'm an executive coach for various executives who are looking to expand their learning experience or taking on new roles, things of that nature. Also an adjunct professor at Fordham University on diversity, equity, and inclusion, business, and ESG. So that's what I am doing now, which has been a really interesting experience. I also do a lot of speaking engagements because I think it's important to use our voice, particularly on topics of social impact and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Very interesting. Yeah, that is a fun story. Wow. Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun. That's for sure.
Yeah, social dweller. Well, I've just been thinking I want to hear a question out of the jar, and then I got some other then I have other questions. See where this goes. Let's pull a question from the jar and see we're going to peel you back like an onion. Not that you haven't already. Let's see.
I'm ready.
Oh, okay. What's the most joyful thing you've ever experienced?
Having my children.
Yeah.
Yes. They're really cool.
It's a cool thing, right?
It's an amazing thing. I think it's the best thing you can ever do. And it's interesting as they get older. As I mentioned, they're both now in college, a freshman and a senior. It gets even more interesting every day as they get older and you have different types of conversations with them. And it's just an amazing experience.
Yeah, I always say what the age they're at, right? We always talk, when people say, "Oh, it's my favorite age," and I always say, "Oh yeah, just whatever age they're at is my favorite age because it's
Ex-
all magic." Yeah,
exactly. Every age is my favorite age as well. I agree. That's for
yeah.
sure.
As I mentioned with you off, before we started that I moved, I intentionally landed in Portland because my daughter's here and she has three kids.
Hmm.
And my other daughter lives on the other side of the country, but no kids yet. So, no dad, no. So I had to make my choice. Um, and I went with a bigger family. But it was funny to talk about the different ages, and there's 7 and there's 4 here. And then there's a 9-month old, almost 10 months old boy.
Oh, wow.
And we were laughing because last night he wakes up at 1:30 apparently and just starts singing in his own way. You can understand what he's singing, but the words are not there. But he was singing his favorite song now is "The Wheels on the Bus."
Oh, I love it.
So imagine you're just waking up at 1:30 in the morning, and what do? You start singing "Wheels on the Bus" go round and round because that's what you do when you're 10 months old.
That's right. That's right. That's great. I love that story.
What Tell me a little bit. I mean, Asia was because Asia is really you're a New York person. You grew up in New York. You go to London and you're going to Switzerland. I mean, these are very established, very old countries, culturally as well. And Asia's older in some ways, probably culturally, but as far as the advancement of the business and the economies, and then the people, when you arrived there, I mean, was it a bit of a shock when you started traveling to, you went to Indonesia, you went to if trying to think of where else USB would have been, I mean, Malaysia is all, pretty fancy at the time still already, but you're dealing with really a different, I mean, really, and within Asia, different cultures.
Absolutely. No, and it's honestly, Ken, I thrive on different experiences and new challenges and adventures. So it was really a great experience, even upon arrival. I mean, to your question about was I shocked? I think certainly when I went to certain countries, I would say
Yeah.
probably the one country that I love, but I was very shocked the first time I went there was India. Just the
Amen.
right, just the the vibrancy of the culture is amazing, but then you have this juxtaposition of wealth and poverty that is so stark. And I
Yeah.
remember arriving there being like, wow, this is really a completely different experience. I mean, I ended up going there 10 or 12 times and
Yeah.
enjoying more and more as time went on. But that was probably the most shocking for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I ended up living in India for I traveled there for 20 years,
Okay.
on and off. Depends on what the company was doing or who I was working for assignments. But yeah, agreed. Hardest country to travel to, but also most fascinating. And I loved it. Loved the people, loved the culture. But that
Yes.
juxtaposition, right, was really tough to not assimilate, but just to absorb or to digest mentally,
Yeah.
visually.
Yes. Mentally and visually for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely. But
yeah.
the food's incredible and the people are amazing. So
Cr-
it's
Wild. We were starting an insurance company back in 2001,
oh,
and interviewing people was wild because we were interviewing some of these people that were like the best potato chip distributor in all of the North, the best Coca-Cola rep. And we were interviewing all these really these international brand people who had really good training,
uh-huh.
and we're selling different products, and we were going to teach them how to sell insurance.
Oh
And
wow.
just so much fun watching them grow. And now some of these people are CEOs of companies and directors, and 20 years on, they're leading the industry. And
Right. I
yeah,
can imagine.
it's fascinating to look back and see the impact, that businesses had and international businesses can have. What
Hmm.
do you hope to do with change for social good? What are your dreams on that? If you're 80 and you look back and your daughter's running it, what does it look like?
Well, that's a great question. My vision is still evolving. It's
Yeah,
a I decided to go down this path in terms of developing a consulting practice, but I am keeping my options open for the future. To be frank,
yeah,
in terms of why I started it and what I hope to achieve is really to drive social impact and help
mm,
people understand what diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about from a global perspective. as well as to understand sustainability and ESG issues and how they intersect. And just
Mm,
in terms of really being, as I mentioned, I love to speak externally because I think it's just so important for people to hear these words and to have a voice in society. And so that's what I want to happen, is that people are educated, developed, increased understanding and awareness of social impact issues, as well as having that voice as part of the community and creating partnerships with other organizations and other people to get these messages out there.
I've been surprised. I'm somehow have ended up in a parallel universe with you. I'm, in that this empathy and compassion for leaders.
Hmm.
And we when I was showing up to work,
Hmm.
the old that if you went to HR, something that the real or your boss even, and then if you went to HR because you didn't like the answer from your boss, they would say just leave their stuff at the door. When you come to work, leave that whatever garbage you've got in your head, your home, your family, your kid, just that stuff stays outside. When you
Hmm.
clock in and you show up and you put on your hat and you put on your little title, we're gonna stamp vice president of operations on your head, and you go do that role, and everybody will talk to you like that person. But the reality was the whole person was showing up all this time apparently,
Right.
and we're finding out that actually being a compassionate leader,
Uh-huh.
showing some empathy, is also good business. It's not just being a good human; it's also good for business. Um,
Absolutely. 100.
yeah.
I couldn't agree with you. And this whole concept of being a compassionate leader, or I call it an inclusive leader. I mean, I
Okay.
just ran a workshop the other night for a company based out of Australia, and the whole discussion was helping educate the executive team, or the whole organization, a very small organization, on the business case
Yeah.
for diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Yeah.
and business case for being an empathetic, inclusive leader, and how
Yeah.
it leads to better engagement, productivity, and profitability ultimately. So it's a very
Oh,
interesting discussion.
yeah. I think it's a little counterintuitive in a way. I think a beginning for people because maybe the assumptions that we've got or the culturally as we grow up, especially leaders that are there now, you've got 50, 60s, probably even 70-year-old leaders, owners, people who built stuff,
Right.
and tough for them. I think to get there initially, right? Just to, you want to reject because that's not how I got where I am.
Right.
Um, but now realizing there are other ways and there are ways that are actually better. Ultimately, it's a you've got a long road. You got a lot of work to do.
There's a lot of work to do, and it's really interesting because I had a conversation along these lines about a week or so ago about how it used to be that these skills around empathy, compassion, relationship skills were called soft skills, right? When I started
Oh,
off,
that's right. Yes, yeah, there was a name for him.
and it used to always really bother me. I'm like, what is soft about these skills? And it's very interesting how the world has evolved, to your point, to really appreciate and understand the value of what were originally soft skills, and now we know are actually more important than the technical skills in order to be successful, to keep your people engaged.
Oh, those are the CEOs. I,
Yes.
I mean, you get hired because you're really good technically, but it's like an actuary. I was in the insurance business, and actuaries are like super, pure mathematicians, and they think in ways we don't think, and they have a very amazing gift and a very powerful technical skill. And we used to call them. It was funny. We used to call sometimes people would call themselves marketing actuaries,
Okay.
and we used to just giggle because that was just so counter. It was just the opposite of an actuary truly was.
Right.
But you find it's like a soft skill and a hard skill, right? They really were people that had soft skills. They had these really skills that could take them far past the technical ability, and
Mm.
they became CEOs, very valuable people.
Right. I believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They had the techie side.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's sort of the table stakes, which is the technical skills that you need to bring to the table. But then, in order, in my view,
Oh,
up the ranks, you have to have these additional relationship skills, and particularly
yes. Yeah.
learning ability.
Oh, that's great. Let's try another question. That was
Okay.
a little bit fun. I got a couple other questions, but we'll sidetrack here. Just keep it a little spicy. It's
Okay.
11 o'clock it's already 11:30 for you. So do you, okay. Do you share your worldview with others openly? Okay.
Wow, that's a great question. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, for sure. I knew yes.
I I do. And sometimes, particularly during the challenging times that we live in today in society and geopolitics,
Yeah.
both in the United States and globally, certain topics are difficult to
Hmm.
address. And
Yeah.
certainly the topics that I do for a living are very difficult to address, DEI, ESG. But I believe in being open and honest about my views, but also being empathetic and understanding and appreciating others' views so that when you are direct in sharing your worldview, it doesn't come across in any sort of combative way, but rather
Mm.
honest, candid way. And so that's how I try to be, is authentic and true to myself.
I think that's a safe, it's also a safe place because you are who you are, you wear it, you own it.
Mhm.
And you're not that balance between preaching and kind of being factual or just steadfast in your way. And then you've got the stories behind it. You got the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's having the truth behind it, and having the conviction to, to express your views openly. I mean, I was raised by a mother who drove a tank for the National Organization of Women back in the 1970s across Houston, Texas, while my father was window of his office and trying to close the curtain. So I was raised by a strong woman who taught her three daughters and her son to be very confident and open with their viewpoints.
Whoa. Okay. That sounds like a whole nother show.
Yeah,
Mom.
it could be, believe me.
I, I would imagine. It's funny you're talking about worldviews, and it's just a kind of a side story. I landed in Indonesia at some point, and I can't remember what year it was, but you can roughly guess. I got in the taxi, and the taxis, as they often do, curious as a foreigner, where you from, and I said America, and he looked in the rearview mirror. We caught eyes in the rearview mirror, and he looks at me, he goes, "Oh, George Bush, boom boom." And like bomb, like boom boom. This is back when
Right.
the Iraq war, and you just think sometimes you're who you are and what people think of you kind of precedes the conversation of who you are and what you believe.
Yeah.
um and I think that goes not just in other countries, but definitely as you sit down in meetings across the table from people, and how to get past all of that. And I think you must face that as well. You've been in some high spots, like you said, first woman here, first person starting, like you said, tough conversations around ESG, around equity, and around inclusion. How
I-
do you get past those kind of assumptive moments with people when they're looking across the table at you?
well, it's a great question because there are a lot of assumptive moments that, and based
Yeah,
on one's appearance, as you just said,
yeah,
and I fall into that category when I tell people what I do for a living. It's what I do is I again try to empathize, try to understand where the question or the concern might be coming from,
hmm,
and really to seek understanding and not necessarily agreement. And I think
I
that's
love
really
it.
important in terms of having those difficult conversations, is really try to get to that place that I'm not trying to convince you of anything, frankly. I just want you to understand my viewpoint. And even more importantly, I want to understand your viewpoint because I want to learn from
Yeah.
this conversation.
I think that's that acceptance piece.
Yeah,
I don't have to agree with you, but I can accept how you got there. I can accept your views, and I could be accepting of all of that.
exactly.
But we may not agree on everything.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And more than
yeah,
likely, we won't, but it's okay. It's okay. In
yeah.
fact, that's wonderful new ideas.
I love how you said that. Actually, probably factually, we're not always going to agree. In fact, if we did, it'd be weird.
Exactly.
Um, but it is funny how today we do seem to focus on what we don't agree on and less about all the things we probably have in common.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's
Yeah.
a we do, and unfortunately, there's a lot, and I think, and particularly in the United States, and certainly globally as well, given all that's going on, I do think that a lot of topics and discussions have been politicized in many ways, and so
Hmm.
that makes it even more difficult to really have open conversations. So you really have to navigate the waters, tread lightly but strongly. And I just
Mm.
that statement right now.
Yeah, write that one down.
I will.
Write that one down. That sounds like a good part of some. That should be in one of your presentations, one of your speeches from the stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, write that down. I had a conversation. It was yesterday, or the day before, with Tasio, and a Greek gentleman, and we were talking a little bit about flourishing, and we got into Aristotle. We had a very interesting, very cool conversation, and part of it was he has an acronym called HEART,
Okay.
and it is around really empathetic leadership. It's his coaching, kind of his acronym. He goes through what each letter stands for. And as we were conversing, I talked about a tree and roots and stuff. And oh my goodness, that's a perfect, visual. And, by the end of it, he was saying, he was writing a book. And I said, well, if the tree's not on the book, on the cover of the book, you're fired. That's it. I'll never be your friend again. So
I like
it was
that.
very cute. He's really interesting. That was a great conversation with a really interesting person. Okay, we got still time for another question, and then I want to get some thoughts from you on, what you're doing, how people find you, all that good stuff.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, you got a little bit of before you went to Asia, this may have been a tougher question, but this one should be a little more, I'd say more of a creative answer. You'll have a different view now. Is karma an energy?
Oh, wow. Is karma an energy? I've never had this question before, so that's exciting.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, I would say yes, karma is an energy, because I would describe karma as a feeling. And so, as it being a feeling that you're getting some type of energy from the world at large or from another individual based on a connection, or perhaps it's really the status of things to come or things that are happening now.
Ooh.
I think that's all about energy and movement. So I would say
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Feel the movement. Right. I like that. The movement.
Yeah,
It's constant. It's alive, right? It's moving.
exactly.
What's the speech you're hoping to get hired for? If the phone rang or you got that email tomorrow and somebody, was writing you, and you opened up the email tonight or tomorrow, and they laid out, Patsy, this is who we are and this is where we're at. And we want you to come give a keynote speech to these 1,000 leaders. What is that speech that you would really like to leave with people, and to hopefully make that kind of that impact and impression on them?
Sure. So I would say there's a lot of topics that I love to speak on,
Yep.
but number one would be to have a discussion, a speech, if you will,
Yeah.
on intersectionality between diversity, equity, inclusion, and ESG and sustainability, and how the two really are entirely integrated
Yeah.
and not in most organizations to date. And so to really talk about how those topics intersect and how one can build out an effective DEI or ESG strategy with
Hmm.
the organization, and as well as to ensure progress over time.
Yeah. It's that. How many companies have those as separate? Those are separate people almost in most, and separate departments.
Yes, they are. In my experience, most organizations, in fact, I've seen very, very few
Yeah.
integrated the two. ESG often and sustainability will often sit within the strategy or operations function, or sometimes in investor relations, whereas diversity
Yes.
and inclusion is always in human resources. So I was very proud to have the role I had at UDR
Yeah.
Investment Trust, where the CEO had the vision to combine the two functions, and it was the first time I've ever seen that, and I haven't seen it again.
Actually it's strange, but when you think, it does sound on surface, it's a little bit weird for
Hmm.
me. And then, but when you think about it, Yeah, actually, it makes a lot of sense. And it's actually a great metaphor for the company in a way, because you are taking these physical assets and the human assets and finding a way to make them get some synchronicity out of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you think about the S in ESG, right, it's all about people. And that's
Yes, yeah,
people and community, values, engagement, learning and development, wellness, all of
yeah,
these are all part of the S in ESG. So I think a lot of people think about ESG primarily from the environmental perspective, so the E in the ESG,
mhm.
when actually you've got a heavy human component in the S as well as the G, which is all about leadership and executive compensation and fiduciary responsibility. Again, this is all about people. So it's fascinating to me, and I would love to speak more and more on this topic to organizations globally.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I did notice this, when I went to the Change for Good website, and to your page, and they can find you on LinkedIn,
Yes.
especially if you're listening on audio on the audio platforms now. It's great. Go have a look, because it is interesting. Now that you mention this, the way you articulated that, I got that feeling as I went through your site. Yeah,
Great.
yeah, 100%.
I'm glad you did. That was certainly the intent. So I'm glad that it's coming across that way. And I hope that listeners will look at the Change for Social Good site and see how these concepts really come together.
It is fascinating now that you're saying, and I'm getting that vibe. I have one speech that I've got, or part of a book I'm working on, and one of the prepared kind of speeches. You'd enjoy the metaphor, the ideas, called Tom Yum team building, and it's
Ah,
after the Thai soup, the Thai dish Tom Yum seafood, like kind of a hot and sour, spicy seafood dish,
mhm,
and I use that as a metaphor for team building and the importance of, you know, each part plays its role in the soup. And, it's up to the chef how to the final way. In the north of Thailand, it's a little more sour. It's a little spicier, a little more thin. And then you get down the further you go south, it gets a little sweeter. Maybe they throw a little bit more coconut milk in it, but you'd never mistake the dish for anything but what it is.
right.
And too many chilies, it's not nice. Too much
Mhm,
lemongrass, it's not nice, and if you get too much ginger or garlic, or, this, depending upon the seafood, if it's not fresh, right, it's gonna have, if you use frozen, or you just use, the meat only and not the whole body of a prawn.
mhm,
And, just this importance of, and the beauty of it, when you do get this diverse group together and put them in one place, and you let it come together, you cook it, it can be such an amazing dish. And it's always up to the chef how it's the final product, but the point is, it's in balance, and it's a kind of a symphony, if you will, when it's put together right. And teams can be like that.
right.
If
I love that. I just wrote that down. I love that. I think that's a fantastic metaphor that's really quite powerful. And with our experience in Asia, it definitely resonates even more. But I think the concept of how all, little sprinklings of this or that can have, and in the case of a team, right, it's a skill or an attribute, have a
Yes,
huge impact on how the team operates.
yeah. And you need that base. You need a good, strong base to start with, and each team member brings their piece, and they shouldn't. They don't look. A mushroom is not looking like a chili, and it's a completely different function in the soup.
Right.
Uh, but without it, the soup's not complete.
Yeah. I love it.
And and if it's all chicken stock, or it's all fish stock, it's going to be a pretty boring soup. So you better make sure your team is got a little bit of diversity, and diversity, not just in color and sex, et cetera, but diversity in skills and attitudes, and kind of positions, and life experience. You know,
Absolutely. I agree with you. And my view on diversity is it's very much, if not mostly, about diversity of thought, style,
I
approach more
yeah,
than
yeah. That's what I hope diversity comes out of. That's what you need on a team. Everybody's got their skill. They're all skill players.
right.
They're all skill players, but sometimes you need to, boy, I look at some of the CFOs that I've worked with, and actuaries, and, at times when I wanted to do something, and you're in the executive room, and you always get that spicy CFO. I
Mhm.
used to have my nemesis, and I still chat with, I'm still friends with my one nemesis, CFO. We still chat,
Right.
on WhatsApp. For people who haven't been out of the country, WhatsApp is a really great international communication app, and we still chat on WhatsApp and talk about life and stuff. And boy, we used to sit across from each other in meetings, and our teams would do battle, and we would do battle, to try to get to the greater good for the company. But
I,
we were
I
diverse.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's great that you have that relationship because sometimes your nemesis can be someone that you can learn the most from. So that's great to hear. And
Yeah.
yes, familiar with WhatsApp. My children go to school, university overseas, so I'm on WhatsApp all the time.
Oh, you still okay? That's great. You still have it. Yeah, you still. Um, Fine. How about some final thoughts? What do you want to leave the audience with? I think you've left so many great messages down, so many great thoughts. How about any kind of final thoughts you want to share?
Sure, happy to. I think it's important to always be trying to learn. I think, learning agility, as I mentioned earlier,
Oh
is
yeah.
actually one of the number one predictors of success in leadership. And I think the more that we can all approach life with a learning mindset,
Mm,
curiosity, the better people that we can become over time. And the more that we can offer others in order to become better people, more learned, more interesting, more exciting. And as part of that, seeking adventure and taking risks in your life and experience. So those would be my final comments to add.
well, Patsy, you definitely have sought experience and change, and change is a really powerful thing. With you just kind of reminded me of that another conversation we could have a whole go at. But I want to thank you for your time. I know you got a busy day ahead. It's great conversation, and really pleasure to meet you and hear your story.
Well, great to meet you as well. And I really enjoyed the conversation as well. You made me think a lot with these questions out of the jar. So it was great.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks everybody for listening, supporting the Humanist. If you're catching us again on the audio version, just drop down real quick, leave us some stars, and if anything really powerful in there, especially we also got a great audience on YouTube. Anything controversial we said, you want to have a good comment on, have a go, and I always enjoy some back and forth on the YouTube platform. Patsy, thanks again so much. Hang around for 10 seconds. I'll see you on the other side.
Okay.
Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel